Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Energy Audit Thursday, and today we're talking about patterns. Um, when life gets hard, what do you default to? And is it really serving you? Listen, when life gets hard, what do you default to? And is it really serving you? Today's title is to really break the loop, right? The habits that hide our power. All right. What I want you to focus on this morning is noticing and breaking default patterns like numbing, procrastination, and isolation. Okay. You know that we're talking about navigating or seizing control of your life with the plan. And this whole week, we've been talking about navigating obstacles, right? Um, and that is the end and plan. And it's so important for us to understand you know, how to really navigate the obstacles that show up in our life because it's a part of life. And the whole idea for this week is to really get you to understand that sometimes life is going to push back. And am I looking at that as life is against me, or am I truly recognizing that as a part of life, the life lesson, right? Am I recognizing that as a part of the life lesson? Why I'm having this session because I know what it's like to because I know what it with personality traits. All right. We learn to cope in chaos. All right. We learn to cope in chaos, numbing, avoiding, and overdoing. And we call it strength, you guys. I used to call it control chaos, right? Like I would create the situation and like I would solve it. And I said I had this control chaos. But we learn to really cope in this numbing, avoiding, and overdoing, and we call it strength. Now there is something called emotional resilience that we're going to talk about later. But survival mode, I want you to know the survival mode is not a life strategy, you guys. And today's life lesson is about identifying the patterns you return to when life gets hard, right? Not to shame them, not to judge it, but to bring up some awareness so that we can free ourselves really from the grip, right? From that grip that that pattern has on us. All right. The disclaimer for today, this lesson or this session is designed to really raise your awareness around your default energy patterns, right? But we know that real change doesn't come from naming the pattern alone, right? It comes from creating new ones. And that's really where the winning happens. So you don't need perfection. You just need presence and a practice that really supports who you are becoming. All right, who you are becoming. Okay, this week we looked at how setbacks can shift our mindset on Monday. We looked at our emotions on Tuesday and our decisions on Wednesday. And now we're going to zoom into these habits that really quietly control how we respond, right? How we respond. You've been reacting by reflex, all right? Now it's time to really respond what? In purpose. It's really time to respond in purpose, okay? So good morning, good morning, good morning. I want to welcome you back. Welcome you back to Life Lessons with Dr. Sheila Little. If you're new here, I'm Dr. Sheila Little, the creator of the Stop It Now model, right? And it's Energy Audit Thursday. And my body is healing this morning, you guys. I went out this weekend and I think that my body started trying to adjust. So you may see me like, rub my nose or dab my eyes. And yeah, because my body is really healing, but I wanted to show up. So today, we're pulling the curtains back on the unconscious patterns that really take over when life, starts to feel out of control. The ones like strolling instead of speaking up, or hiding instead of asking for help, or pushing through, right, instead of really resting. Let's call it out, right? Not with judgment, but truly with truth. So before we start this life lesson, let me know. Drop a word in the chat. How are you feeling this morning? How are you feeling this morning? All right. This is a no judgment place, right? Just your presence and your awareness, right? We want to move that energy. So, how are you feeling this morning? Good morning to everyone. I'm feeling grateful this morning. I'm feeling grateful this morning. Like I said, I can feel my body healing from a bug and it's doing what it's supposed to do. So, this morning I woke up with a lot of gratitude. I think the body is so phenomenal as it, notices things that we don't notice. And it's rare that I will say, like, you know, that I'm sick, because I understand that something has already happened in my body now is responding to that, right? My body is responding to that. So before we go in, let's put our feet on the floor, or feel our feet on the floor, and bring compassion to our bodies, right? These wonderful vessels that, are truly there helping us to navigate, our life, and, getting us to where we need to go. And really a house, right, for us to really, or a container, or a house, a home where we can, return to. So feel our feet on the floor, feel our feet on the floor, up our legs. We're gonna have some compassion this morning, right? Our thighs, okay, our butts in the seat. Just with a lot of compassion and love this morning. Even if you want to rub on your body, just love it in a gentle way this morning. All right, up our stomachs and our spines. Really just feeling our spine and all the nerves that's associated with that spine, and gently just telling ourselves thank you, right? Telling our body thank you and that we love it. All right, all of our organs. Just bringing some attention to our organs. Our lungs, our liver, our kidney, her intestines, right? And then that heart space, just filling our hearts, just fill up with love and compassion and forgiveness on this morning, right? Forgiving ourselves, right? And forgiving others. Let's start to move to activate. I know that it's some things in our life that we feel like we just can't let go and we can't forgive. But remember, forgiveness is not for the other person, it's really for a release for you. All right. Up our shoulders, right? Just feeling our shoulders kind of relax, down our arms, feeling our muscles, our strong muscles, right? Our elbows, our forearms, and our hands, activating our hands this morning, really thinking about what we're going to do with our hands today. Are we going to get them clothes folded in that basket? Are we going to wash them dishes? Are we going to do something? Are we going to write, journal? Whatever that is, let's bring that attention to our hands this morning, and then up our necks, right? Up our necks, you know, um, really activating that throat chakra. We've activated the heart chakra. So we're activating our throat chakra, our third eye, our brain. Let's really, our lips, our noses, right? Uh, Getting present behind our eyes, right? And activating our brain, right? And then connecting our brain back to our hearts, right? And then going down to, through our solar plexus, through our sacral chakra and our root chakra, right down our feet, right? Connecting back from our feet back to our hearts. And then our hearts, what? To our minds, you guys, to our brain, right? Activating. And then that space around is our skin, which is our biggest organ, right? Our biggest organ. Just thanking this body, this vessel. Like I said, I really think it's a good practice to really scan our bodies. We have judged our bodies so much throughout life, and our bodies have been judged either as not good enough, not looking good enough, not healthy enough, not, pretty enough, not built enough, not, and we just want to accept it. Just a little bit of acceptance today that we're going to bring in into this life lesson on this Energy Audit Thursday. So good morning, everyone. Listen, who this session is for? It's for you, really. If you notice yourself numbing out, right? If you notice yourself numbing out or withdrawing when things get overwhelmed, all right? When you're overworked and distract yourself instead of really processing pain, right? So we have this thing where we want to overwork and distract ourselves instead of really digesting, right, and processing the pain. All right. Where if you feel like your responses are on autopilot, like you're not present, like things happen and you just feel like I'm just going with the motion, all right. You're tired of cycling through the same reactions and ready to really start creating new ones. Okay. This is for you if survival mode has really become a second home for you, right? And you're ready to really move into something healthier. All right. All right, our focus area to today, for today, is really again, what do you default to when things get hard? I want you to think about that. Really recognizing and breaking the survival habits that keep you in the cycle of delay, burnout, and detached emotions. All right, and detached emotions. I woke up this morning and I heard the rain, and I like the rain. As long as I'm in the house. but I had to take my son to school this morning, and just driving in the rain, seeing the rain come down. What came up for me was how the earth will take care of itself, right? Like, there was some grass that I saw getting dry and things like that. And when I got out the car, I looked at the grass and I noticed it like just green, like very, very green, right? And so I want us to recognize and break the survival mode. Why? So that we can take care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, and physically, and really break this cycle of delay, burnout, and emotional detachment. All right, why does this matter? Because when life doesn't go as planned, a lot of times people don't decide to shut down or procrastinate. It's just a default, right? It's not like you're making a decision to shut down or to, procrastinate or to not have that conversation. A lot of times it's just your default behavior. Good morning, Pep. All right. Because the brain loves familiar more than it loves freedom. Really the brain just loves familiar more than it loves freedom. And familiar reactions really feel safe, even if they are self sabotaging. Okay. So this session really invites you to really shift from autopilot coping into conscious recovery, right? And to autopilot coping to conscious expansion, right? Just being present, right? So here's the patterns that kind of will show up, right? This numbing, so binge watching TV, overeating, scrolling on social media, right? Isolation, pulling ourselves away, right? To figure it out alone. Okay. This is one of those patterns that we don't plan to do, but we tend to, when life gets hard, we isolate, we pull away, and we are trying to figure it out alone, right? And we can have a community of friends, a family, but we're not involving them for some reason, right? Because of a big part is because of our own judgments. And one of those judgments is, I just don't want to bother anybody. I just didn't want to bother anybody. And you could be going through a whole lot, but you will tend to pull away, figure it out alone. All right. Over functioning, really driven by busyness to avoid feelings. So a lot of us are just doing a lot of busy work, keeping ourselves busy to really avoid feeling. And then this control thing, really trying to micromanage outcomes or people. And I say that this control issue is big because it's so like the thing you don't see, right? It's what you don't see, but you're controlling because every action that you're taking is what you're trying to control the outcome. So what I'm gonna say so that I can get this result, what I'm gonna do so I can get this result. And that's one shift that we have to make. We're not in control of the outcome. And a big part of the reason why we're not in control of the outcome, you guys, is because guess what? That's another person, right? They get a free will to choose, right? And this is where we start to shrink. This is where we start to minimize. This is where we start to lie to ourselves, right? In the presence of other people, right? We're not really bearing our truth, right? Now, I always say you got to lie to you before you lie to me, right? So that's why I say we lie to ourselves in the presence of other people, right? We do things to what? To try to control the outcome. And it's like, you know, let's not attach how we show up to any type of outcome outside of faith and believing that that thing is working for me. All right. Good morning, big brother. Good morning, big brother. Y'all, my brother's birthday is tomorrow. Okay, so we're gonna celebrate him in the morning. Good morning. All right, and then indecision. All right, I don't know. Then that looks like I don't know becomes a safe place, right? I talked about, being in a session with the one lady, and she asked herself a question, and like, what's keeping me safe, or what am I protecting? And that voice inside of her said, me, right? Good morning, Miss Jackie. Good morning, Miss Jackie. Miss Jackie said, good morning, Dr. Little, Dr. Sheila. Good morning, Miss Jackie. So, I talked about the girl who I asked her, what is she protecting? And she said, me. But, me came up in her spirit. But what she said out of her mouth was, what? I don't know. And a lot of us know the answer, but what do we say out our mouth? We'll say, I don't know. And what is that training the brain to do? Look for what? The gaps, look for reasons to stay stuck. Listen, these aren't personality flaws. Listen, they're learned protection, right? You've learned this behavior. All right. Here's why you need to hear this, because the pattern you return to when things fall apart was probably built to protect you once. Okay. The pattern that you default to when things fall apart it was probably built to really protect you, but now, right, it's preventing your growth. All right. It was probably needed in that season, right? But it's not needed anymore. Like I said, today it's raining outside, so we go get the umbrella. Okay. That's for this time. I need the umbrella. But do I need the umbrella every time I go out the house? No. No, I don't. Okay. But a lot of times we've developed these habits that show up that protected us. The umbrella protects me from the rain, but it ain't raining now. So, tomorrow or later on, it won't be raining. So I won't need that umbrella anymore. So, a lot of times we are going into these behaviors and we're in there, they're just not serving the current you that you are today. Okay. So this session isn't about shaming the pattern or judging the pattern. It's really about naming it, honoring its origin, right? Where did it come from? And really choosing different with new tools, new solutions, and a new mind. Okay. All right. So I want you to think about this: pattern interruption equals peace activation, right? So I'm going to interrupt these patterns, right, and do something different. If I always took a left, right, I'm going to take a right today. If I always took a left, I may go straight today, right? Just to interrupt and disrupt the pattern. All right. Again, how does this connect with the rest of the week? On Monday, we talked about how we reframe the narratives to setbacks. And then on Tuesday, we named them emotional trap wires that we get caught in when we go to what? Navigate the obstacle. And then on Wednesday, we acknowledge the fear behind our hesitation, right? We all have it, but we're going to move with the fear. And today on patterns, we're really looking at what you do when that fear is truly activated and how to repattern from survival mode, right, to thriving. Okay, to thriving. What is our guiding quote for today? Listen, just because it's your pattern doesn't mean it's your purpose. Just because it's your pattern, it doesn't mean it's your purpose, you guys. Listen, I worked with a man that I was coaching, and he said, whenever I feel like I'm about to fail, I disappear, right? I stop texting people back. I miss deadlines. I binge watch TV for days. Then I beat myself up for really falling off. I thought I was just lazy, but it turns out that I was scared. All right. That fear created this loop of what? Shame, avoidance, and more shame. And then shame, avoidance, and more shame. Listen, when we mapped out his pattern, he recognized it had nothing to do with laziness. He had judged that as laziness, but it had nothing to do with that. It was really an old response to trauma. If I hide, then I can't be judged, right? If I hide, then I can't be judged. And once he saw that, he didn't need to fight himself anymore, you guys. He just needed to rewire his response. So every time he went to, he would get present, and that's what we would do, just get present. Like, what is going on this week for you? We would talk about that and the emotions around that. Okay. And a big part is just practicing that, right? So when that situation came up, instead of what? Instead of binge watching the TV, instead of like not texting people back, let's communicate what you're going through. And a lot of us will disappear in this way. Okay. I want you to know that you are not your pattern. You are the person powerful enough to really change that pattern. All right. You are the person that's strong enough to truly change that pattern. All right. So let's do our heart check in today. I want you to ask yourself, when I feel emotionally unsafe, right? What behavior do I default to? And what do I really need instead? All right. When I'm feeling emotionally unsafe, what behavior do I default to, and what do I really need instead? Something's coming up in my spirit like emotionally unsafe. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, because a lot of times we don't think that we're emotionally unsafe. Why? Because we're focused on the external situation, right? It's this person is hollering, this person has has offended me. This person has crossed my boundaries. So our focus typically will go to external, right? What's going out on outside of us, when truly that thing that's going on the outside is triggering what? Something on the inside. And that is what your pattern is trying to protect, right? And we can do that in a healthy way, or we can do it in a very judgmental, harmful way. And what does that look like when I say that? So just say somebody said something to you that you didn't like, right? Or that triggered you, right? When they said that or that made you uncomfortable or frustrated, right? So what your nervous system is going to do is it's now trying, that is the emotional unsafety, right? You feel threat. You feel a threat. That's the emotional unsafety. But instead of breathing and really asking yourself, okay, am I safe? Right? Can I have this conversation? Can I communicate, what I need in this moment? Can I communicate my thoughts clearly? What we will do is we will default into protection mode. And protection mode is what? I'm on attack. I'm finna attack you. You always say this, you always going, oh, here you go, right? And we'll end up ghosting the conversation, or we'll end up talking about all the stuff that we had to go through, or whatever that is to really bypass, right, this emotional unsafety that we feel. And it's okay to recognize that that's just emotionally unsafe for me, or I did that because I was feeling emotionally unsafe. And I really wanted to stop and talk about when I feel emotionally unsafe, what is that, right? It's the nervousness, it's the defensiveness, it's all of the things that we're doing naturally to protect ourselves. And I want you to know that a lot of times it's just that you're feeling emotionally unsafe, and that's okay. But can we address that differently? Can we start to address that differently? And if you can't, then that's how you know you probably need to get a therapist. You can, come into my coaching programs. I do one-on-one coaching, or, group coaching. But this is where we do this work, right? This is where we start to work on how do I start feeling safe enough that what's going on the outside of me doesn't trigger the inside of me in such a way where I can't now execute the thing that I want to execute. If that makes sense, put a one in the chat for me. All right. Listen, your default patterns are not flaws. Okay. They're not flaws. They're actually your adaptations, right? They of what you have adapted to based on your environment, circumstances, conditions. And I have to say this language, right? I have to say language. All right, because and but what you once protected, right, you may now, or what once protected you may now be what preventing you. All right, it may be preventing you now. And I do want us to really think about that. Like, don't judge it as a flaw. It's actually an adaptation. Like, it's what you needed to do to what? To survive. That's what your mind told you that you need to do. And and so you develop callousness, right? This like I don't care. You develop defensiveness, like I don't care, right? You develop these things as an adaptation to really adjust to your environment. But what once protected you in that season, may now be preventing you in this one. All right. I want you to think about that. If you and think about this, if you want to respond with power, you have to first recognize what your power is protecting or has been protecting. All right. So your pattern awareness equals like personal agency. So if you can't notice your own patterns, right, and it's very difficult to take your power back. All right, this isn't just about habits, you guys. It is truly about healing and expansion, right? Releasing the loops really means that you no longer have to perform safety, right? You can live in that. You can live in that safe place, right? I knew a client that said, I used to ghost people when life got hard. Okay. But after identifying that I had a pattern, right? That was my pattern. I learned to really send one line messages like, I'm overwhelmed, right? And I care. I'm frustrated, right? But I need my time, right? So instead of ghosting, right, we really talked about like, how can you connect, communicate, right, and still contribute to the relationship, right, in a way that you care, right, in a safe way where that connection is staying, right? This one shift really saves so many connections in this individual's life. All right. Listen, neuroscience shows that behavior patterns really wired through trauma can be rewired through intentional repetition, you guys, in nervous system safety. All right. Small conscious interruptions really build new default responses. And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not really these big things that we need to do. It's in these small shifts, right? It's in when I feel my body getting tight, when I'm talking to somebody and and I want to say yes, but I'm listening to this voice in my head that's like, say no. I was with my thought partner yesterday we had a meeting, and one of the things that he sent me was like these questions. It was like, I don't know, 10 questions or whatever. And so right in the response ended up happening was one of the things he said was like, man, this is 11 pages, right? Like this is a lot, and I had to kind of, and I felt like, I don't want to say like judgment, but I did feel like in that, and when he said it's a lot to take on, I wanted him to understand this. I said, listen, what you see as 11 pages can sometimes just be, if they all work together, right? You ask these questions, and I wanted to bring awareness to it. But me answering that, those 11 pages can simply come out like that's the energy, right? This 11 pages is the energy, but it can come out in a yes or a no. It's not the demonstration of those 11 pages, is what those 11 pages mean, like aligning in integrity, being able to speak my truth, being able to show up in my personal life and my business life in this aligned way, right? When I said that, I'm like, so where you're saying, man, to execute all of this is going to be heavy, I'm saying, no, it's not that heavy. Sometimes it's just a simple no, right? Because that is my truth, right? Or yes, I'll do that because that is my truth. So I'm telling you this because when we go to journal or we go to work with people, we have a lot of ways that we want to show up in our minds. And I gave him that, right? And as we're having this conversation, like, what would that look like? Sometimes that just looks like a yes. Yes, I can do that. Or no, I can't. You know what I mean? And it's so hard sometimes for us to let our yes be yes and our no be no. Sometimes it's doing the thing that I don't want to, don't really feel like doing, but because I said I was going to do it and I want to, be a steward with my words, I'm going to do this thing not based on how I'm feeling because my pattern may be to do something else, right? But I'm going to break that pattern because now I want to be aligned in integrity with my words. If that makes sense, put a two in the chat. Okay, put a two in the chat. I want you to know again that those small responses, those small yeses, those small nos, trusting our spirit, like when it says yes, saying yes, and really allowing life to unfold, it's not these really big, grand steps that we have to do, right? It's really in these small moments that we're making decisions, right? That's in alignment with what we want. That's basically what I was trying to say. All right. So let's move on to the stop it framework. This morning we're talking about the P, and we know that the P, right, is the P in stop it really stands for patterns, right? So patterns, when stress hit, I want you to know that when stress hits, we don't rise to our vision, you guys. We fall to our default. Okay, we don't rise to our vision. We fall to our default, and if we don't choose patterns with purpose, we'll pass your 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 past will. Okay, so when we don't choose patterns with purpose, our past will choose that for us. Okay, default mode doesn't get to run your destiny. Okay, again, what is this saying? This is saying that if I don't, when stress hits, when life gets difficult, see, it's easy to say, you know um I want to work out. It's easy to say, I want to be in a relationship. It's easy to say the thing that we want to do, right? But when life starts to happen, okay, when the car breaks down, right? When you're upset with your kids, right? When you have a difficult relationship, or a difficult conversation with a friend or loved one, right? You said you wanted to work out. Are you going to allow this stress now, right, to stop you from working out? That's what that looks like. And a lot of us are saying we want to do stuff, but we're allowing life, as life is affecting us, to stop us from doing the thing. So when stress hits, we don't rise to the vision, right? We typically will fall back to the pattern. The pattern of what? Detaching. I'm just so overwhelmed. I hate that conversation. We get bad news or something like that, right? And then we will fall back into our default. So we will binge watch, we will disconnect, we won't answer the phone versus pushing through that pattern, right? Versus recognizing that pattern and saying, okay, What did I say I was going to do today? Because that's a moment, but I can still do the thing I said I was going to do, or even seek out support. All right. All right. So here's seven essential things that I want you to think about that that really speaks to this relationship between and patterns in navigating our obstacles. Listen, your pattern is a protective response. All right, not a personal failure. All right. If you guys don't know it already, I'm really trying to get us out of judgment mode, right? Really trying to get us from judging ourselves so harshly. Okay. So your patterns, they're not your pattern is a protective response. It's not like a personal failure, right? So when obstacles arise, just your nervous system is scanning for safety. It's not scanning for strategy. It's like what is gonna make me safe. All right. So default behavior like isolation, numbing, and overthinking are truly responses to preserve or to it really are responses to the perceived threat. All right. Not signs that you are lazy or broken or incapable. Right. It's not even looking at strategy. It's saying, hey, you know what? I see a perceived threat, so it's time to fight, flight, freeze upon. All right. Right. Here's why. Because here's why. Here's what I want you to think about. Why do I keep shutting down, right, when life gets hard? All right. Why do I keep shutting down when life gets hard? Here's the thing. Here's the truth. You're not deflecting. You have been conditioned, okay, to shut down when life gets hard. And it's your job to recondition yourself. All right. So if you asking a question like, why do I keep shutting down when things get hard? Like, why can't I push? Because you've been conditioned to do that. Either the environment you saw did it, right? Either the environment you saw did it, or as you got older, it was a coping mechanism to what? To keep you safe. It was a protective response, right? And so you do that long enough, you create what? The pattern. All right. And now we have to recondition you with a new pattern because obviously, if that question is coming up, something wants to what? Change. Some part of you wants to change. All right. Number two, every pattern is a rehearsal, you guys, is a rehearsed belief in disguise. Okay. So every pattern is truly a rehearsed belief in disguise. The way you react to challenges really reflect a deeper belief. All right. Usually, this belief is about your worth, your capacity, or your safety. So if your default is like to shut down, right, the hidden belief may be my needs aren't allowed, right? My needs aren't allowed. What I want is not important. So I go back to the girl, what are you protecting me? That wasn't enough, right? So a lot of times we don't feel enough, right? We don't feel like we're worthy enough or capable enough or have enough capacity or safety. So we'll just shut down. All right. All right, here's the desire under this. I want you to think about a lot of people, the desire. I want to start reacting and I want to start responding with power. All right, that is the desire. But if, listen, here to do that, this is the shift that you're going to have to take. If I can trace the pattern, then I can transform the belief. If I can become aware of, my pattern of this hidden belief that's really shutting me down, guess what? I can trace that pattern back and then I can transform that belief. But if I'm not willing to do the work about this deeper belief of unworthiness, not feeling safe in my capacity, then that pattern is always going to be there. That default may always be there. Because guess what? This pattern is truly a belief in disguise, rehearsed belief in disguise. All right. Number three, repetition creates safety. I want you to know that repetition creates safety, but not always freedom, you guys, right? So it will create safety, but it doesn't always create freedom. All right. Your brain prefers what's familiar, even if it's painful. All right. So your brain actually prefers what's familiar, even when it's painful. That's why old behaviors feel safe than new breakthroughs. Okay. That's why I just feel safe in new breakthroughs until what? Until you consciously disrupt them. All right. Here's the pain point. What do I keep going back to, or why do I keep going back to the same old habits? Have you ever asked yourself that? If you ask yourself that, put a three in the chat for me. Like, why do I keep going back to the same old habits? Here's the truth. You're going back to the same old habits because familiarity isn't always aligned. Okay. right? It's not what you're familiar with may not be aligned with who you want to become. All right. So you keep going back to what's familiar. But freedom, right? It requires you to disrupt that. Your freedom is going to require you to disrupt that. All right. So I work with a lot of people like, I don't know why I keep doing this or why I keep, attracting the same man or why I keep blowing up or why, why I keep doing this. And it's like, it's a pattern, right? That's why. And the overthinking part of us wants it sometimes to be more than that. And it's like, no, that's just what you've always done. That's probably what you saw your mama do, right? In the book Stop It Now, if you haven't gotten it, it's on Amazon. I talk about this thing where I would see my mom when we were younger. My mom was the pack up queen, honey. You know what I mean? Like we were packing up our bags and leaving. It could be like 3 o'clock in the morning. And, my mom and her husband had got into it, or, her and her boyfriend, and like she getting us all up and we getting in the car, right? And we out of there. Okay. She would just pack up and go. Now, when I got to be a woman, right? And I'm dating now and I'm in this relationship, guess what I started to do? I started to pack up and leave, right? The difference between me, I didn't always take my kids, but like, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm about to go. So I'll go to my daddy house, I'll go to my grandma's house, I'll go to my friend's house. But I noticed that it was the same pattern that I saw my mama do, right? I saw her pack up and leave, right? It created a safetyness in us, right? Because we would hear them hollering and things like that. And so I learned, I caught that behavior. And so when things got difficult, I'm like, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna pack up and leave. And I had to break that. So how I started to break that was the first thing I was like, well, you don't gotta leave, just go to your room, right? You don't have to leave, just go to your room. So and I mean, when I tell you everything in me would be like, you got a car, you can leave. And it's like, nope, you don't got to leave. Right. So it became where I would just go to my room. Like, I'm going to just go to my room. I'm going to just go to my room. And then it was like, you don't have to leave the space. You know what I mean? Like, you can stay present. Right. It was a gradual shift. So I went from leaving the house to leaving the room to my room to like staying present. Now, I probably wasn't listening, but I was staying present until the fact where I can engage back and forth and really stand in my ground. But I had learned to like pack up and go, get your stuff and go. And I'm coming back. You know what I mean? I'm coming back. I'm coming back mad. And here's the thing, it didn't work because guess what? We never really solved the problem. We never talked about it, right? But it was my way of what? Safety. It was me protecting myself, right? And I desired to have the conversation. Like, I'm like, I want to talk about this. But in my mind, like, it was like, I just couldn't talk about it. Like, I had to flight, I had to go. All right. If that makes sense, put a 4 in the chat. All right. So repetition creates safety, not freedom. So some of the repetitive things that you may be doing may not even be something that it may not even be something that you started. It may be something that you learned how to do. All right, because familiarity again is not always in aligned. It's not always aligned with who you're becoming. You know, and to really get that true freedom that you want, it really requires you disrupting that behavior, becoming aware and disrupting it. All right, number 4, obstacles don't just trigger emotions. Okay, they trigger patterns. All right, I mean, obstacles don't just trigger emotions, they trigger patterns. Listen, when things get hard, your body remembers what it used to do to survive. All right. So that might be silence, that may be people pleasing, that may be procrastinating, that may be pushing through. All right. All right. So the desire, though, could be I want to stop shrinking every time I feel overwhelmed. Like I want to stop shrinking every time I'm triggered. I want to stay present, right? But the emotion that you're feeling, right, it's not just the emotion. The emotion is like a domino effect that's triggering what? The pattern. The pattern of hiding, the pattern of not going, the pattern of hiding, the pattern of sabotaging, the pattern of disconnecting. All right. All right. So emotions obstacles just don't trigger the emotions we talked about on Tuesday. It triggers a pattern that's associated with those emotions. And again, a lot of times this disconnect is associated what? With the feeling of unsafe. The unsafe is triggered with what? What emotions make me feel unsafe? And believe it or not, happy can make us feel unsafe. Love can make us feel unsafe. A sense of peace can make us feel unsafe. Comfortability can make us feel unsafe, right? It's as if the shoe is going to drop. Joy can make us, if we don't have relationship with these emotions, right? And you start to love somebody, or you start to connect with people, or you start, so it's not, even when we're talking about emotion, it's not always just the sadness or the anger, right? It's also these higher vibrating emotions that can create this unsafety. Why? Because I haven't felt that, and I'm not in a relationship with that, and it makes me feel vulnerable. If that makes sense, put a five in the chat for me. All right, all right. Listen, your patterns aren't the problem, you guys. Your attachment to them is. So your pattern is not the problem. Your attachment to your patterns is what the problem is. Habits only become harmful when you mistake them for your identity. All right. So patterns are not the problem. All right. It's your attachment to the pattern that's a problem, because habits, right? It's what your body gonna do, right? Your body, first we build our habits, then our habits, make us, right? So if I do this thing long enough, my body is going to create the habit. Okay. Habits only become harmful when we attach our identity to them. All right. So saying I'm just not good under pressure, right? That's like you're affirming an identity with a habit that you can change, right? So saying you're not good under pressure is a pattern, right, that you've done. But just because you're not good under pressure doesn't mean that you can't learn to become good under pressure. Okay. All right. So saying I've been responding this way, but I'm ready to do something different, that will set you free. Like I recognize that. So saying like I've responded this way, right? But I'm ready to do something new. That shifts the energy, right? It's directional now, and that's what sets you free. All right. Because a lot of times people feel stuck and powerless to change because they have identified the habit, how they showing up in these patterns as who they are. And it's like, no, that's not you. That's your body doing what it was created to do. And that's what makes the body so amazing, because you can reprogram it to do something different. All right. You can reprogram, but you're going to feel the resistance of that reprogram. Like it's kind of like pulling the gear, right? It's like it's some resistance in trying to pull back this habit, or change this habit. You're going to feel that resistance. And that's truly what the work is, because the truth is you're not your habit, you guys. You are your healing and expansion. All right. Number six, breakthrough requires you to choose a pattern before. I mean, breakthrough requires you to choose a pattern before it feels comfortable. All right. So you won't always feel like doing the healing things. Okay. You won't always be ready to take the aligned action. Right. But pattern interruption doesn't need your comfort. Okay. It needs your commitment. It doesn't need your comfort, you guys. It just needs your commitment. Again, like I was talking about earlier, sometimes you don't feel like doing something. Right. But I'm doing it. Why? Because I know that I'm building a different habit. And for this habit to take precedent over the other thing that I was doing, I have to consistently put my energy over here. And that's what's disrupting that. So when I want to shut down, because I've always shut down, now I got to show up, and 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 I got to show up. And then showing up, what becomes my default? All right. It becomes the new pattern. Does that make sense? All right. Because here's the desire into that. I want to build discipline and emotional consistency, right? But if I don't do the thing to really build this discipline and emotional consistency, because it doesn't feel good, right? Then, or because it's not comfortable, right? Then I'm going to escape. All right. I'm going to escape. I'm going to say it's not working. All right. But it's kind of like pouring water from one cup to the other cup, right? You're taking this energy and you're moving it to another space. All right. All right. And that is where commitment and consistency is, right? So I want to invite you to just start to take small steps, right? To take small steps, but to start, right? But to start, okay? And if it gets difficult, or if you find yourself falling off, give yourself some grace and get up and do it again and again and again. All right. And eventually you will see this new pattern start to show up more. All right. And last but not least, is a pattern that breaks healing is the pattern that breaks all others. Okay. Healing is the pattern that breaks all others. So when you choose self-trust instead of self-sabotage, all right, presence instead of avoidance, compassion instead of critique, you guys, guess what? You start creating patterns that's rooted in freedom, not fear. All right. All right. Listen, if you're saying to yourself, I want to live in peace, not panic, right? You really have to get a conduit of how I'm doing this. This is in the intent, right? So, um, so I'm trusting myself, right? Self trust is good because that is now the vessel in which my behaviors or my thoughts and my emotions are running through. All right. Present. I'm gonna stay present instead of avoid. Like this is a part of my healing process and really being present and aware. All right. Compassion. If I'm compassionate with myself, then no matter what's happening, there's some grace that I'm providing, right? But if I'm critiquing myself, then that can trigger back into this old pattern. All right, I want you to remember that you're not behind, right? You're breaking cycles. So I want to encourage you to keep going. All right. So I want to encourage you to keep going. If that makes sense, put a 6 in the chat for me or a heart in the chat. All right. So we're gonna go into our spiritual lens, which is our biblical wisdom on this morning. And I'm going to bring in this verse that we talk about possibly like every other week, but it's Romans 12 and 2, right? Be ye transformed or be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's Romans 12 and 2. Listen, transformation is not a moment. It's a mindset muscle, you guys. It's a mindset muscle, and patterns are the reps. All right. Transformation is not a moment, it's a mindset muscle, and patterns are the reps. I love this because I think that we literally do think I can do something one time, or I did that thing one time. Good morning, cousin Debbie. I did this thing one time. Like, what's the problem? I heard a group talking yesterday, and it was talking about a relationship, and the lady went to her, just say she went to her husband, and she was like, I need your help, I need your help, okay, I need your help in helping me to with the kitchen, cleaning up. And just say 90 days passed, right, and he had help 6 times with the kitchen, right? He helped clean up the kitchen 6 times. So she walked in on the 90th day. She walked in and she says, he's playing the game, and she said, you never clean up the kitchen, right? You never clean up the kitchen. And what this guy was trying to demonstrate was that um, now the guy knows that he's cleaned up this kitchen 6 times, right? He's cleaned up this kitchen 6 times. So because she said you never clean up the kitchen, now he's defending his 6 times that he cleaned up the kitchen, right? He's like, but I have cleaned up. I cleaned it up last week. I cleaned it up then. And he's protecting what? These six. Her request was for the 90, but when she dismissed the six, it was as if, you know, he felt threatened, right? What the lady came back and said was, but what she was looking for was consistency, right? So, yeah, you did it 6 times, but I need the consistency. Why this plays in with transformation is not a moment thing, because he was trying to meet her request inconsistently. Like he's doing it like 6 times, but it's a mental muscle. So if he would have been consistent and communicated, like, hey, I know I was supposed to clean up the kitchen, or my intent was to clean up the kitchen, or really, we're she was just looking for the consistency and the awareness that he knew that he should have cleaned up the kitchen, right? This happened so much because maybe he felt like the 6 times was enough. Maybe he felt like one time was enough. In our minds, we think that I can go to the gym, or I can do this thing one time, or I can have this conversation one time, or I told you I forgive you. I've seen people in relationships who cheated and they like, but I told her I was sorry. And it's like, yeah, but you telling her you sorry one time, right? You apologizing for that one time is not the it's not the transformation, right? It's you showing up in that apology, or meeting her wound, right? Her insecurity in a way, because that's the mental muscle. That's the emotional muscle that is now transforming, right, what you did, transforming the distrust to trust, if that makes sense. Put a 7 in the chat, right? And so a lot of times uh we're looking at, we want transformation to happen in the moment. I said that I want to do that, or I said I'm sorry, or I apologize for that, or I did do the thing that you wanted me to do. But listen, transformation is not a moment thing, you guys. It's a mindset muscle. All right. And patterns are the reps. So the more you do the thing, the more you will be what? Transformed. All right. What did this mean in plain terms? Transformation again is just not a single decision, right? It's a daily discipline of shifting your patterns. All right, your thought loops, your responses, and your defaults. And this verse reminds us that if we want to change our life, right, you have to start by changing how you think about your life, right? So that you can what? React differently. All right. The practical application of this is that this isn't about really chasing perfection. It's not about chasing perfection. It's just about asking, is this the way I normally respond? Is this the way I normally respond? Right? And is it aligned with who I am becoming? Is it how I normally respond? Or is it aligned with who I'm becoming? Right? Instead of saying I always done it this way, right? You begin to say, when you start to transform your mind, instead of saying I always done it this way, you may start to say, listen, that may have been how I survived. That may have been how I did it before, but I'm choosing to move in purpose today, right? I'm choosing to move in purpose today. Here's what I want you to know. God is not waiting for you to magically become better, you guys. God is not waiting for you to magically become better. God is working with you through rewiring your thoughts and your patterns moment by moment, right? So transformation isn't a performative act, right? It's a participation. It's like it's again, it's in the showing up, right? It's in the consistency. It's in the bringing that in to your everyday, either energetically in your awareness without judgment, right? In your actions, in your words, right? It's in that, all right? So you're not earning the change, okay? You're evolving into it, all right? You're evolving into it. And a lot of times, I always talk about the prime in the walls. You know, a lot of times in the beginning of the year when I'm working with clients and they have these New Year's resolutions, I'm like, yeah, you may need to prime your brain for that. All right. And what we know what priming is, if the old pattern was red, right, and I want to go over it with yellow or blue, right, I just can't put yellow or blue over it, right? So I have to prime the wall first, right? Put a seal between the base color red that was on the wall previous in this new color that I want. So even transforming the mind is, I'm talking about this. I'm journaling about this. I'm affirming this space. So I want to start working out. Maybe my language will start to change where, I work out regularly, right? I eat healthier. You may not be acting in that way yet, but your language is aligned and directional into what you want to be doing. Now, I know we feel like we're lying. Oh, you lying. You said you was going to work out, but you didn't. And that's where the judgment comes in. And then we stop what? We stop the priming process, right? But if you was painting the wall and you knew you wanted it yellow, and you painted the wall with the primer and it was white, you wouldn't just be like, oh, it would never be yellow. You know that the primer is a part of the fullness of the yellow becoming, or you know that you need the primer to make the yellow stick. Okay. So we have to really we have to change and shift our language, right? And really start speaking and affirming, whether we're acting it out or not, because that is a part of making it safe in our bodies. All right. And a lot of times we're saying we want to do stuff and we're just jumping right into it. Like, I want to start working out on Monday, and then on Monday you start working out, but you ain't primed your body for that. So, by Friday you're not working out anymore, and it's like, well, what happened to you working out? Well, I'm gonna get back on it. I am working out. I'm fit. Right? We're affirming it with words and taking a couple of minutes a day to really say, my body is fit. I'm healthy. I'm working out, or I'm a good communicator, or whatever. Now your behavior still may be stuck in these old patterns, but you're priming yourself for this renewed mindset. Okay. that is the challenge, really, because again, we want everything to happen at one time. If I say I'm working out, I want to be able to get up on Monday and go work out. And then if I say I'm gonna work out 5 days a week, I'm gonna get up and I want to work out 5 days a week. But if you have never worked out 5 days a week, that's a big thing to do. Okay. So maybe you start to tell yourself 5 days a week that I'm working out today. I'm working out today. I'm working out today. I'm working out today. Okay. And then when you don't, right, don't judge it, because the intent is to do that. And then you start to become aware of the time that you're gonna work out. Man, I want to work out at 10. I want to work out at 10. I'm making space for it. Now you probably still ain't working out, but because you're priming your brain for to do this act, now you're setting up a time at 10 o'clock. My phone goes off and it says go work out, right? Now, my body probably hasn't caught up with it, but I'm priming my space, my mental space, and my emotional space for that. All right. And then eventually, guess what? At 10 o'clock, I'm going to be at the gym. You know, it will happen. But that's the part of patience being a virtue. And really, if we want to create a sustainable lifetime, a sustainable lifestyle, we have to start priming our minds first, and really looking at and looking at that transformational being a mental muscle, and then the patterns that we do being the reps that we do, and that is in our language, that is in our activity, and that is in us disrupting these old patterns. All right, all right. Now, Pep said, "Amen." Thank you, Pep. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, it's just so important that we stop tripping ourselves, because we will have these plans and then we don't go through with it, and then it only triggers the old pattern of I can't trust myself and things like that. And this is why it's just so important too to get with a professional that understands, how to break habits, to talk to people, to have accountability partners, right? Until you can hold yourself accountable, because again, moving the needle is like, pulling the brake, pulling the brake up, right? It's like, like you're going 100 miles in one direction and you want to go, in another direction. Like y- that is a lot of momentum in one direction that you're trying to shift. It's kind of like throwing a rock in the river and thinking you're going to create a dam. Like, no, but you throw enough rocks, you know what I mean? And big enough rocks, eventually those rocks start to build on themselves, build on themselves, build on themselves. And they don't just become dams, honey. They will become whole islands. Okay. All right. All right. So here go the promise verse. I have the right to do anything. Okay. I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. That's First Corinthians 6:12. Listen, this was Joshua really, um, this was just because something I'm sorry. Just because something feels familiar or easy doesn't mean it's aligned, you guys. You get to choose what serves your future. All right. And I want you to know, just because something feels familiar or easy, it doesn't mean that it's aligned with the person that you're becoming. And gently said, with the life you want. Okay. I like the person you're becoming because we're always evolving. But if that feels a little overwhelming for you, well, what you want, right? Just because something feels familiar and um it doesn't mean that it's aligned with what you want, okay? With what you want for yourself. So listen, what this means in real life, you can stroll for hours, you can ghost people in conversations, you can numb out with distractions, right? And no one's going to stop you, right? No one's going to stop you. But the question isn't, can I, right? It's, is this helping me truly truly who I am, or is this helping me get what I really want? You can take that truly who I am, who I'm becoming, that very sophisticated way of, is this gonna give me what I want? Is this gonna give me the body I want? Is this gonna give me the income I want? Is this gonna give me the relationship I want? Right? Is this gonna give me the business I want? Right? These are the desires that you want. And if just because a behavior feels familiar, right, it doesn't mean that it's aligned with the thing that you want. And you gotta uh really start to figure out, like, what is it that you want, right? And then now, who do I need to become? And that's the becoming part, because To get that thing that you want, right? You have to become the person that can have it. All right. That's the becoming part of it. And that's the part that we don't really talk about. Like I want to be a millionaire, and a lot of us feel like we're gonna get there by playing the lottery. But we've seen people who play the lottery and hit the mega millions and get broke again. Why? Because they didn't become the person that can sustain $1 million. Okay. We've seen people like, I want to get married, I want to be in a relationship. Okay, they get the relationship, but guess what? They didn't become the person, the husband, the wife, the boyfriend, the girlfriend that can sustain a relationship. We see people who say, I want kids, right? They had a kid, but what? They didn't become the parent, right, to really create productive, healthy, minded, emotionally balanced children. All right. And so there's a conflict within within that relationship. I want the job. I would love to do that. All right. But what happened is the person didn't become the person that can that can sustain the job. So think about what it is you want. That can be the focus. But we also have to think about, who do I need to become to not just get it, but to sustain it. To sustain it. And that's where we as a community is, if I'm saying falling off, it's because we have no sustainability, right? We're getting the things, we're getting the relationships, we're getting the money, we're getting the income tax returns, we're getting in the relationships, you know what I mean? We're getting the booty, if you want to say that, right? But we're not sustaining the relationship. So we feel like our life is going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, because we're not becoming the person emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, right, that we need to become to sustain that. And that is where the work is. All right. That is where the discovery is. All right. So when I'm saying, you know, is this helping me become who I truly am? Right? Is this helping me become who I truly want to be? It is really saying, is it helping me get the thing I want and sustain it? Okay, and sustain it. Listen, this verse is about freedom. Okay, it's about freedom with responsibility. All right, you're free to choose, but you're also accountable to be the kind, you're also accountable to the kind of life you choose to create. All right, this is not about restrictions, you guys, it's about alignment. So the patterns you repeat are creating your future. All right, and I need you to know that what you do today, there is a consequence to that. Okay. So if you eat, I don't know, away today, like your body is digesting, you may not feel that pound today, but you're gonna feel it, right? If that's your pattern, okay, eventually it's gonna show up. All right. So where you are today is a consequence of what you did yesterday. And when I say yesterday, that could be 10 years ago, a decision you made 10 years ago, 5 years ago, all the way up into today. If you want to be somewhere different tomorrow, then it's about making small shifts, becoming aware, getting the help and support that you need to make these small shifts. And as you're shifting, believing that in a week, 2 weeks, a month, or a year, guess what? I'm going to be in a different place. All right. Pat said it's not what you have, it's about what you keep. Absolutely, right? It's not what you have, it's about what you keep. They did a study that said by 2053, the median income for minorities or black people will be zero, right? And it ain't because we ain't got a lot of money coming through our community. We do. You know what I mean? We got a lot of money coming through our community, right? But it's what we choose to do with it, or how we choose to sustain it, within our community. But that's a whole nother conversation. Listen, the patterns you create are creating your future, basically. And you get to decide if that future reflects your wholeness, right? Or your habits. Okay? Your wholeness or your habits. Listen, these verses speak directly to the core tension in that people carry. All right. You want to grow, but you're stuck in loops that feel safer than your liberation. All right. You want to align, you've built you've built you you want alignment, but you've built a normalcy around survival. All right. And you want this spiritual depthness or this relationship with the creator and all of that. But sometimes you fear messing up if you don't do it perfectly. So we want this spiritual alignment. We want this relationship with God. But then we have this fear of messing up or being judged or being in trouble, okay? Or we have this thing where we want to be perfect before we start to make that relationship more feasible. All right, listen, you are already worthy of transformation right as you are today, okay? Now make the room for it, and that is your responsibility because you're ready. All right, you don't have to punish, you don't have to punish or judge the pattern, right? You just have to notice it, right, and choose something more loving, more supportive, and more conducive to your desires, okay, to your desires. All right, now let's put that into action on this morning. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat, you guys. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat. Now, how do we put this into practice? What I want you to do is identify one behavior, okay? You notice when life starts to feel hard. All right. One behavior that you notice when life starts to feel hard. And then I want you to ask yourself, what emotion is that behavior really trying to protect? All right. What emotion is this behavior trying to protect? And then I want you to choose one micro shift. Okay, something small that you can do instead that aligns with how you want to feel. All right, just one small thing that you can do instead that really aligns with how you want to feel. And if you want to journal today about today's session, then here's a journal prompt that you can use, which says, "What patterns keep pulling me back?" All right. And what truth, right? What truth can I root into? I mean, what truth can I root into? Can I root into to really create a new one? Okay. So, what patterns keep pulling me back? And then, what truth can I root into, right, to create new ones? And then, the affirmation for today, I am, it's thundering outside. I am not reacting. Okay. I am not reacting. I am responding. Oh, that's the journal prompt. Our affirmation for today. That's the wrong affirmation, guys. I am reacting. I am not my reaction. I am my response. I have the power to pause and choose again. All right. I am not my reaction. I am my response. And I have the power to choose again. And our intention for today, all right, the intention for today, listen, I want you to today. I respond with the awareness. Respond with the awareness, not autopilot. I choose what to interrupt the loop. I choose to interrupt the loop. And if you want a challenge, right, a bonus challenge for this morning, here's the thing: create a pattern, create a pattern interruption phase. All right. So when stress rises, I want you to speak it loudly. So an example is, this the old me and I'm choosing differently. All right. I'm choosing differently. And then we all know that I'm gonna have a call, this challenge and this charge. And the call, challenge, and charge for this morning is, listen, I'm calling you and I'm asking, what default behavior have you noticed? Okay. And then I'm challenging you. I'll challenge you. I challenge you to think about what's one truth you're choosing to interrupt it with. All right. And then I'm charging you this more to go shape your life. Okay. To go shape your life. I'm charging you this morning to go shape your life, not from perfection, but from purpose, you guys. But from purpose. All right. Listen, if this session really helped you, name the pattern. All right. Name a pattern, all right, that you're ready to change. You already know, and it provided you with some insight on today. You already know what to do. Drop a fire in the chat and let's celebrate our growth together. Let's celebrate our growth together, you guys. Listen, and if this session really woke you up, right, this is exactly the type of insight that we do in those weekly coaching labs, which is a part of the Project Life initiative, you guys. Project Life is where we turn theory into practice. Okay. I want you to remember this. If you can shape it in your mind, you can have it in your life. You can have it in your life. Listen, I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow when we talk about self validation Friday. Who are you when you trust your discernment? Listen, who are you when you start to trust your discernment? Listen, I love you. I love you. I love you. And I'll see you tomorrow for that life lesson. All right. Till later.